Boom, water breaks. Here comes Gabby. I
Yeah.
had a 36-hour labor, which is pretty long. And evidently, I found out I've got what do you call it, a uterine deformity where it doesn't open all the way. When I'm going through this delivery where they're trying to decide what to do with me, and all these male doctors are examining me, trying to figure out how to get this kid out of me, right? Lawrence felt that one of the doctors was inappropriate with me. And he was evidently down, his hand was down there too long.
Oh
So
my
he
God.
goes off on this doctor, claiming the doctor was molesting me and attacked the doctor. So security's called and they're going to arrest him. So he goes flying out down to the service elevator to not be arrested. Okay? So I'm like, lovely. I've got him flipping out on me during delivery. Okay, you know? Then he threatened to kill mom, and security came after him again. And
Hold
he
on.
started calling
Yeah,
mom
wait.
a witch. I mean, he's just having episode after episode. And I'm looking at my mom going, can you please just get him out of here? Like, I'm a little busy having a kid right now, you know?
Why was he calling her a witch?
I found out later she called the coven and he'd heard it and freaked out that he was telling her to keep her witchcraft to herself. And you know, so they're going at it like two wet cats in a bag out in the waiting room, right?
Oh
You
my
know,
God, what a
she was saying it
fucking
was her
mess.
daughter and she could do what she wanted, and so they're arguing out in the waiting room about mom being a witch, you know. And I'm just going, okay, please, security, just get them away from me, you know. I mean, I'm just
Oh
trying to have this
man.
kid, right? Yeah, so it was a three-ring circus, but I will say this, because like after 36 hours, she just wasn't coming out. And they're, of course, trying to talk me into C-section. Now, I've heard the C-sections, they put you on morphine. I'm a recovering addict. I don't want to be on morphine after a C-section. So I'm fighting them every inch of the way, saying there's got to be some way you can deliver this kid without a C-section. And I finally made a deal with them. I said, you get a female doctor in here who tells me that there's no alternative for this other than a C-section, and I'll agree to it. And they said, get a female doctor. You know, so they bring in this, I think she was Persian, little Persian doctor comes in. She goes, there's another alternative. I'm like, I'm all ears. And she said, we can suck it out with a vacuum. Okay. You know, sounds like an idea to me. So they, I'm not kidding you, they vacuumed this poor kid out of me. They stuck the vacuum on her head, got the suction, it popped her out. Poor kid had blisters on the top of her head, though.
That's alright, you got her out.
We got her out, and it was pretty rough. They had to cut me up pretty bad to get her out too that way, but I didn't care as long as they weren't. I just didn't want a C-section and all that morphine they were talking about, you know. Because of being vacuumed out and the blisters, they said that the blisters caused her to have some kind of jaundice reaction, and therefore they had to keep her and put her under the blue lights. So for the first couple of days, and she wasn't getting better. So I was like, after the third day, she was not getting better. I had this huge argument with them, insisting that they let me breastfeed her. I
Definitely.
said she needs the antibody. She's got to have it. So they finally agreed to let me do that. I got some breast milk dinner. Boom! By the next morning, she's fine. I mean, it did the trick.
Duh. It's almost like duh.
I mean, yeah, I had to
Come on,
convince these
guys.
guys that
Yeah,
she needed some freaking breast
hospitals
milk.
piss me off, man. I'm sorry. It's
I
unbelievable.
mean, you should have seen how amazed they were. Like, oh wow, at work, look at her numbers; they've gone straight down.
No shit, doctor.
Oh man,
Okay.
yeah.
So you bring her
So we
home.
bring her home, like yeah, and then
Yeah.
so we get home from the hospital, and he goes, "Your mother's not coming in this house." What? You know? He goes, "I'm not letting that witch near the baby." And he just went into, oh, here we go. I'm going to get locked in the house again. You know, and that's when I said, look, I said, I can't take this anymore. I appreciate you're on your medication now. Then he confesses that he stopped taking his medication a week ago. And I'm going, okay, that explains a lot. I'm like, can you just take your medication? I went with him I said, I'm going to go with you to your next neurologist appointment, because I said, I don't understand why everything's at stake here. I am ready to leave you and take your baby, and you can't take your fucking pills. You know, I mean, I need to go talk to your doctor and find out more about what's going on. He wanted to talk to me alone. calls me in the office, and he goes, "If I were you, I'd pack your shit and head for the hills." And I'm like, why?
I
You
could have told
know?
you that.
And he said, this guy's been doing drugs since he was 11. He's been drinking since he was 8. He said, he's got brain damage. All the speed that he did, in the 70s, he said, this guy's got brain damage, and he said this brain damage occurred while his brain was developing as a child. He said, he's never going to recover from this. And I'm going, so what are you telling me? He said, no amount of lithium. He said he won't take the medication. He said, I promise you, he will not take the medication for longer than 30 days straight. And he goes, here's what your problem is. He said, it's not when he's on the medication. He said, that's fine. He said, but when he comes off the medication, that's when he's capable of anything. And he goes, let me tell you a story about what these bipolars do with brain damage when they're coming off their medication. He said, he is perfectly capable of coming off the medication and going into an episode where he kills the baby, he kills you, and then he has no memory of it afterwards. And he said he's perfectly capable of that. And he said, just leave. And he goes, and if you don't leave, he will hurt you. And then I went to a payphone and said, I'm leaving. Of course, calls me every name in the book, hang up the phone. And, because after I had Gabby, and I realized that the takeover had happened and everybody was shutting me out, I pretty much pulled out of NA and focused on Sex Workers Anonymous at that point. I realized there's nothing I could do about NA at that point, just focus on my own shit.
Good for you.
Yeah,
keep moving.
and that's what I've been doing. Since Gabby was born, I've been trying to stay focused on Sex Workers Anonymous stuff, I took that kid, I stuck her on my lap, because you can imagine every time I put her down, she's crying. But if I have her on my lap, she's not. So I actually learned how to sit at the computer and type with her on my lap at the same time. Because as long as I had her on my lap while I was typing, she was quiet. And I wrote the book. That's the Prostitutes Anonymous Recovery Guide.
Huh.
And I took me about 2 solid weeks, just nonstop. I mean, I stopped to eat, take a shower, feed the kid, go back to write, and I had her on my lap the whole time. I wrote that because I had material collected from all these groups that had been given to me, right? And I had stories that had been given to me, so I got to think to myself, do I really want to do all this television if I'm having a baby talking about prostitution? No. And I did do I did like this blurb in Playboy. I did a Chic magazine spread that was like 6 pages long, and Chic's like an adult magazine. I think it was a 3-part series in Cosmopolitan on Prostitutes Anonymous. And that brought in a lot of calls, you can imagine. We got a lot of calls, a lot of letters. So I'm focusing on print. I got Dear Abby to write about us. And that brought in a lot of letters. And so I'm trying to focus our outreach on print so that I can try to get back to being anonymous,
Yeah.
When I went back to California, this guy shows up to the meeting, Micheal, and he had been sold when he was 8, okay?
Jeez.
And he had been sold to this pimp when he was 8 that he couldn't get away from. He starts telling me these horrible, mind-bending stories of what this pimp did to him as a kid. And his mother was an addict, so his mother sold him when he was 8 to some bikers, like Hell's Angels types, right? And he supposedly got broke in by these Hell's Angels. And then they sold him like 6 months later to this pimp, okay? And he tells me that this pimp was in New York. The pimp took him to like an abandoned building and covered him in honey and left him up there for the bugs to crawl on him. And the whole point was to make him ready to do whatever this guy said to get him out of there. Okay? So yes, he's covered in honey and the bugs are all over him. He's 9 years old. He'll do anything this guy says. That's the way he breaks in all the kids to make them cooperative. Then he said that they would dress him up like a girl. They started pumping him full of female hormones, getting the wig on him, dresses on him, dressing him up like a girl so that when he would go out on his prostitution calls, or his pornography calls, then they would think he was a girl because there was less question about girls, evidently. And he said the lowest earner would start getting picked on and tortured and then eventually killed in front of the other kids. And he said that the killing of the lowest earner was to send a message to them that they better stay on their game or they were going to be next. And if he's telling me that he starts figuring out it's just a matter of time as he gets older that he's going to be on this shit list. You know, as he gets older, he starts going through the hormonal changes when he got about 13. You know, that's when they start developing, you know, male characteristics. He became a liability. Well, he said that he got a gun from one of the clients and he had it stashed. And he said that when the pimp went to go get in the safe to get the gun and he knew it was him that was going to be killed, he got his gun that he had stashed for that occasion and shot the pimp. And so he said he shot the pimp, got into police custody. And I do remember looking up, the internet's been really censored, but I do remember looking up his case. So I do know there's news clippings somewhere in New York about this case, you know? And so, because I'm also wanting to know, is this guy Enemy's story or what? No, there was news stories about this 13-year-old boy that killed his pimp. Only they wrote it off as kidnapper, you know? I mean, but so he tells me that he's in police custody during his trial. And he tells me that when he's in police custody during his trial, he tells me that the guards at night would take money to sneak in pedophiles that would rape the children at night.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and he said that he knew he was not going to survive long in police custody for that reason, you know, because he's like, they're bringing in these pedophiles at night that are just raping these children and no one's believing them because they're in police custody. What do you mean you got raped at night? You're crazy. And then they load him on more medication. So he's like, you know, he can see that he's not going to survive this, so he runs away. He's 13 years old. What the fuck is he going to do? So his clients have been senators and politicians and businessmen. He's just been seeing children sold out of police custody. You know, he doesn't trust anybody. He says that, you know, they found him and they gave him back to the social worker. So when the social worker was supposed to put him into the group home, that instead she got paid off to make it look like he'd run away and he got sold to another pimp. So he tells me he's now back in the same network that he had just tried to get out of. He starts telling me the story. His story is that these pimps of children have a network all across the United States. And so just because he killed his pimp didn't mean that the network was done with him yet. Now, I'm not sure whether this guy's tripping or not, you know, and he's not the only one, by the way. There was another guy named David who had come out of the same family that Micheal had come out of that also had found us. So he's basically in the same network, also recovering. So I'm hearing the same story out of David that I'm hearing out of Micheal. But here's Mike's story, and I really adore Mike. He was like a brother to me because, well, he starts telling me that all these pimps in New York that he's aware of are taking the money that they're getting from child sales, child sex trafficking, and it's going into Sony. You know, and I'm just filing this away. He's just telling me all this stuff like Sony is being built on child sex trafficking money. Okay, you know, but he's telling me about how when you get to be an adult, they put you into management. And like I said, he's claiming to me that the money is being laundered through Sony Records and Sony Entertainment, et cetera. This is how they're like taking all the money from all these operations and they're laundering it through Sony.
Oh my God.
He's telling me that and I'm like, how do you know it's Sony? He goes, I see the guy take the money into Sony every week. I'm like, oh, okay. So, and it makes sense to me because I know how our family was using the club to launder money and they wanted to start a record company. It makes perfect sense to me. What a great way to launder this money, right? Because remember, Tina had told me about being sold at 8 years old. Mike is telling me about being sold at 8 years old. I mean, there's obviously something going on here, right? This is it. I'm hearing Mike's story and Tina's story. I'm hearing all the same story out of unrelated people. This obviously is real. And my mom had even heard stories about, if you see this movie, by the way, Changeling with Angelina Jolie, it references this farm or this ranch where all these kids disappeared too. That was real. That was happening in my mom's day, because she would hear about it at the juvenile hall, about these kids that would disappear in this, and you'd hear, through the grapevine about this ranch, right? And the kids were used in child porn and snuff films and, that kind of thing. So, I mean, this is a very real network. Because I remember in Changeling, they talked about, I thought it was important in the movie, not just the ranch, but this whole system that LA had back then, where they still do this today, where if you buck the LAPD, they will stick you in the nut ward. They will get you arrested. They'll take your kids away. I mean, it talks about this network in that film, show how far back this goes, because this is still happening today. You buck LAPD, you're going to hit this goon squad, whatever you want. There was some name they called it, this network of cops connected up with LAPD and the mental health system and the courts. It's like some kind of gang where it was, I don't know, you have to dig into the history. So this stuff's been going on a long time, in other words, right?
Yeah.
And I'm kind of bringing this up for a reason. Remember, I mean, anything to do with prostitution and recovery up in the early 90s are coming to me. And, Donahue calls. Now, Donahue's coming at me saying that they want to do, another show. So I think that Mike's story is phenomenal, because what am I doing? I'm trying to raise awareness about sex trafficking, especially child sex trafficking.
Yeah.
So Mike's story would blow them away. Blow them away, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe this will be my last outreach. I'll really rock them and get that hotline number out there,
Yeah,
and
the Micheal story is crazy. I go ahead.
That's what I thought. And I really felt that his story would be really important to highlight on the Donahue, So I felt like if I'm going to do this, then we're going to go for broke. I'm going to bring Mike on, and we're really going to rock their world,
Yeah.
Because I had not seen anyone go on national television talking about this network of child traffickers, And here's Micheal living story. And then I get that call from, I made the travel arrangements to do the show, because we have to give the producer our address and stuff for the flight. Anyway, now, mind you, Micheal is, I know, staying at this apartment in West Hollywood. And I think I'm the only living person that knows where he lives. As, he's being very careful about his identity, where he lives, because of these people, and he says they're still trying to suck him back into the operation. So anyway, Mike and I were scheduled to do the show originally. And then I figured, okay, well, it'll be my last hurrah, and I'll get the promotion out for the hotline, right? And then, a couple of hours before the flight, I get a call from the ER. Michael's in the ER. So go over to ER. Michael's just had the total living shit beat out of him. I mean, he's just 2 black eyes, broken nose, the whole shebang. He's beaten to a bloody pulp. Now, the only people that knew where he lived, was the producer from the show that arranged his flight from LA out to New York. And the guys that came and beat him up, he said that they had told him, "You're not getting on that plane." He could have told me anybody beat him up, right? He said, no, they don't, they told me don't do the show. But he was so beaten up, he couldn't have made the plane anyway. So I just, I'm not happy, Now, that's why it's the last show I ever did. Because in my mind, if these shows are being used to get information on our members like this, you know what I mean? Then I'm not doing it, And that's why you don't see any more of my talk shows after 92. But I've later learned about the connection between Sony and NBC, and NBC was the studio where it was being filmed. So all I know is, I get a call the night before. We're supposed to be on the plane in the morning, and I've got to go see Mike in the ER. He's just been beat to a bloody pulp. And he's telling me that he got a visit, and they told him not to get on that plane. And I'm speechless because I'm like, how do they even know? Again, this is pre cell phone, pre internet, how do they know? You know, and this was not long. I mean, he didn't live long after Donahue. He really didn't, because I think he found out he had cancer maybe a month later, because he said the doctor said that all the hormones they put him on as a child were just so massive, it just fucked up his body. You know, so he had some kind of cancer related to the female hormones that they had him on. Evidently, they were cheap female hormones too, and he didn't live long. I mean, he didn't last long. No, I mean, I don't know. We gave him a nice cremation. He wanted to have his, ashes shattered at the pier, so we did that. I mean, Santa Monica Pier, you're not supposed to do it, but he wanted to be off the pier, so I went and did it anyway. You know, and he didn't have any family. I was like the closest thing to family he had, so I took care of things when he died. So he was dead before he was 30.
Damn it, man.
Yeah, these are the people that I'm trying to work with in this program, though. You know, I mean that you can see why to me it's important. Where else would Michael have gone?
No, I mean,
You know,
I salute you, Jody, because this, I mean, not just that, I mean, just so much.